Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of our middle school and high school literacy professional development series. Today, we are talking about morphology part 2, and this is a follow-up in morphology part 1. We discussed what is morphology, how does it help my students, what's involved, when does it fit in the lesson. Today, we're going to focus specifically on what activities you can use to teach morphology and implementing the morphology activities. So in the last session, we spent time defining what morphology is, like I said, and the impact it has specifically on middle and high school students. We talked about determining where morphological awareness fits into a lesson. Today's objectives are, by the end, you'll be able to understand how morphology impacts fluency, so students' ability to read, spelling, vocabulary, and reading comprehension, and then specifically, you're going to be able to implement a mini lesson in morphology to support an upcoming curricular lesson that you have. So these are some things that we went over in the previous session, but just in case you didn't catch it, we'll go through it very quickly. Morphology is defined as a system of units of meaning and words. They consist of a base and affixes. So a base word and prefixes or suffixes to go with it. We talked about the fact that many teachers at the secondary level are not equipped to remediate reading, but developing their knowledge and students' knowledge around morphology will help with students reading better. It'll help with vocabulary comprehension and their ability to just read and understand better in the content areas. They are the smallest units of meaning. Some words have one morpheme we talked about, such as play, show, and build, and others have multiple morphemes. And in the last session, we talked about the fact that reconstructing and deconstruction have 4 separate morphemes. They each have 2 prefixes, a base, and a suffix. And we're going to explore more about that when we get into the word matrices activity in just a bit. You'll see how that works. Morphemes provide students with numerous strategies for decoding, which we said is the student's ability to read, to see those letters, put them together and read a full word, and encoding. So you tell the student what the word is and they're able to spell it out, as well as enhancing vocabulary. And as children learn the common prefixes, suffixes, and Latin and Greek bases, they gain new understanding of these meaning-based building blocks in the English words. We reviewed the fact that this is Scarborough's reading rope, and we said that morphemes are extraordinary, especially because they play a part in both the upper and the lower strand of the reading rope. So you're able to kind of tag team or double team 2 separate strands in helping students to become more skilled readers. Teaching morphological awareness, we said, improves all of these areas. And so helping students to understand the most common, especially bases and affixes, as they see those bases and affixes in different words, it helps them to understand or comprehend more words. And so their vocabulary comprehension increases. It increases their ability to read aloud. It increases their fluency. They'll recognize those words more that contain those basic prefixes and suffixes and roots. It improves their spelling ability. It improves their phonological awareness. It builds up awareness of speech sounds. Those, like I keep referring back to those common ones, but there's basic bases and affixes that occur in hundreds of thousands of words. And so if they know those, they know what they sound like. As they encounter other words that have them, they can sound them out much faster. If students are reading better, if they're spelling better, if they have better vocabulary comprehension, they're going to read and comprehend better overall. So we said, how do we teach it? You want to determine first what morphemes are best to teach. So you could start with a brief introduction. The word matrices activity that I have for you in a moment really focuses on some common ones. So you can start with those and then build into more of what your content area is asking, or you can dive into your content area if you have other teachers across the campus that are already introducing this. And then you can branch out into more of those, secondary based ones like I'm talking about. The most important takeaway, though, for today's session is that morphology should be taught explicitly and directly in order for it to be effective. You have to model. We're going to talk about what that process, I'm going to show you really what the process looks like. But teachers have to be able to show students exactly what to do, and then they have to have guided practice before they have lots of independent practice after that. So here are some other morphemes to teach. These are live links, and so you can click on any one of these. And as always, please just consult your curriculum because you may already have morphology embedded in it. It's a great place to start. especially with the ones that are current for your particular student's needs. So these are some different activities you can use to integrate with morphemes. We're focusing specifically on word family maps or word matrix today, as well as Spotlight. But the link at the bottom has more explanation on all of these different activities. So if you want something beyond what we're talking about today, it's step-by-step directions on how to do any one of those activities. And the dyslexia help link at the bottom is another good resource to go to for other activities within the classroom. So word matrix is one of the most common activities in middle and high school for teaching morphology. And you're going to select the number of morphemes you would like to teach, and then use the explicit instructions on the next slide when you're teaching it. You don't want to introduce too many morphemes initially when students are just learning. So you really probably want to stick with maybe no more than like 3 word matrices when you're just starting out. And then you can determine, how fast your students are picking up on it. And you can add more after that based on, looking at the words in your unit. If you have 10 words in your unit that are really integral in students understanding those to understand the content of what you're teaching about, you might want to just prioritize by importance which ones they are and start with those first. So here are some instructions for teaching word matrices. So it's really important in middle and high school that you start with the purpose. Students need to understand the purpose of what they're doing and why they're doing it in order to anchor that learning. This really just helps with student buy-in, and it helps the brain attach a label to what they're doing so they can access that later. It's going to better help them retain the information. This is just an example of what you can say for a purpose. So if you were my students and we are starting with this, I would say, okay, guys, today, we're going to be talking about morphological awareness and what it is. There are many big or long words in newspapers, magazines, books, job ads, on the internet. And all of these words often include word parts, or what we call morphemes. And they consist of prefixes, root words, and suffixes. Today, we're going to learn how to combine or assemble them and figure out their meanings and their uses. And this is going to help you understand the meanings of lots of different words as you're reading, and help reading become easier to you when you see these words. So the first thing I'm going to do is in just a second, I'm going to flip to the next slide. I'm going to model the pronunciation of the Latin root and its simple meaning. You'll see in a second, they have very simple meanings. You're going to model how to assemble the Latin roots and the suffixes first. The suffixes are basically usually just the tense, or if it's a plural or not. So they're very easy to anchor to a base, and it's easier to start that way. Once you've done that and you modeled how to read the word, how it becomes a new word, and the meaning of that word, then you're going to model how to assemble a prefix to that base. Once again, you're going to model how to assemble it, you're going to model how to pronounce it, and you're going to model talking through the new meaning of it. Once you've done that, you can start putting prefixes, bases, and suffixes together to form new words. And you're going to model the activity, the links at the bottom, but the activity allows them, as they look at these word matrices, to list the new words that they're creating once they start doing this on their own. And there's about 3 lines for them to start writing sentences using some of the words. So let's see exactly what this looks like. So this is the layout of a word matrix. In the upper left-hand corner, so this is really more for you to understand what a word matrix is, but also the resource has blank word matrices for you to use. If you have words that you want to teach that aren't in here, you can understand how to assemble them. So the common prefixes are the upper left, and this is to form new words and change the meaning or the part of speech. You want to have about 2 to 4 per matrix. The bottom left, you may not even have this box. And in the example in a minute, you don't have any, but these are less common prefixes, and they form new words and change the meaning or part of speech. And like I said, you don't need any. So you might have 0 to 3, depending on the root. Then you have the Latin root. Under the Latin root, you're going to have the simple meaning. Depending on what content area you teach, you can choose whether you want to discuss whether it's a free root or a bound root. And what that means is, the next example is a free one. And what that means is, this word, this root by itself can be a word. It can stand on its own. It's free to just be a word. A bound root means that it has to have a prefix or a suffix added to it in order to form a word. So those are the differences. But like I said, you can determine for the purposes of your content area if you want to add the free or the bound. The upper right-hand corner is the most common inflectional suffixes. So these change the noun number or the verb tense. So for instance, if I add an S to a word, it's multiple or ES. If I add ED to a word, it's going to change the tense. It's past tense. ING means present tense. Students are more familiar with these suffixes, and that's why it's easier to model those first. The bottom right hand are common derivational suffixes, and these form new words and may change the part of speech as well. And you're going to have about 3 to 5 of those per matrix. So let's get into what this looks like. So here's my example for you. Okay, class, today's word matrix, we're going to talk about the Latin base of form. And form means to shape something. And it's a free base, meaning that it can stand by itself. Form by itself is its own word. It doesn't need a prefix or a suffix to exist. And there's some different suffixes or endings that we can add to form in order to make it plural or in order to change the tense. So let's look at those. If I add an S to form, okay, so if I have form, excuse me, guys, and I change it, I'm going to get out of here so y'all can see what I can do. And you can actually do this kind of activity with your class. So if you move it up here, form, and I choose the suffix S, this becomes forms. Okay, so I'm going to write that on my line, and that means I have more than one form or more than one shape to something. Okay, let's move the S back. If I add ED to form, then I have formed. And formed means that I shaped something previously. It happened in the past. Maybe I formed a paper or I formed a building. I shaped a building. Then I have the suffix ing. And if I add ing to the back of form, I have the new word forming. Forming means that I'm doing it right now. I'm shaping something right now. Then I have some more suffixes here at the bottom. I have ER, and it's really important as the students are going through this. The top, like I said, the top right suffixes are more common. The bottom right suffixes are less common. It's important. The resource also has I call it a cheat sheet, but it has all of the most common bases, the most common prefixes and suffixes and their meanings. And so it's important that the students have this either on the wall somewhere or in a notebook, or if you're using online learning, that they have somewhere in a web page they can refer back to it. So ER, the suffix ER means someone who. So if I have former, it means somebody who shapes something. A former is somebody who shapes it. If I add ATION, ation, to the back of form, formation becomes the new word, formation. And ation means the act or the state of. And so this is the act of shaping something. So if we think about, sometimes people say the soldiers are in a formation. It means they're in a certain shape. Okay. I can add the suffix AL. And when I do that, AL means relating to. And so formal is our new word. It means relating to a certain shape or a certain way. If somebody's asked to wear formal dress, they're asked to dress or be shaped a certain way, look a certain way. So that's how I can take form and add different, what we called affixes or suffixes is one of the affixes to it to create new words. Let's look at what this looks like when we add different prefixes, which is pre means before the word to form a new word. So we start off with the prefix in, and the prefix in means in, into, or toward. So if I add in before, remember pre comes before form, it becomes inform. So if I inform something, I'm putting something into shape. And so usually when we say we inform someone, we're shaping their mind, or we're putting something into their mind, information into their mind. So it becomes inform. The prefix re means to do again. So if I reform something or if I reshape something, I'm shaping it again. I'm giving it a new shape or the same shape again. The prefix D means to take away or to undo. So if I deform something, I'm taking the shape away. I'm unshaping it or undoing it, right? So this is how we use morphemes to create meaning in different words, okay? And once you see these different prefixes and suffixes and bases, you can apply these meanings to all the different words you see. So if you see any word with the base form in it, you will understand now that that means it's to shape something. Something's being shaped. Or if you see the prefix re in another word, any word, it means to do again. So you're going to start to apply these to different words. Now I want you to come to your sheet and I want you to see how many other words you can make. And this is this teacher hat back on, guys. This is the resource that this is pulled from. These are the little cheat sheets that I'm talking to you about. So the students can have these in front of them when they're creating new words to talk about what they mean, your prefixes and your suffixes and their meaning, and these common root spellings and meanings as well. But you have some pre-made. So this is this one. So it would give, after I model this for the students, modeled again, pronunciation, how to assemble them and how it creates new meaning. I would give the students this page and they would continue to make words from it. I might just model the first one explicitly, the whole thing, give them a new word, and maybe I might just model adding one prefix or one suffix. Then they're going to be given the sheet to create as many new words as they can. Sometimes students are going to create words that aren't really words. They're just going to put a prefix and a base. So it's important, especially with different populations, maybe to have this as a partner activity, especially just, decreasing or scaffolding it as they go. They still have some support as they're walking through this activity. It's important to circulate as you're implementing this new activity and provide feedback to the students. And instead of saying it's a wrong word, tell them to start asking themselves as they're making words, is this a word? Have I heard this word before? Do I think it might be a word? And if they can't answer that, if they are working in their pairs, they can ask their partner, do you think it's a word? Why do you think it's a word? What is the new meaning of the word? And then you can talk about why it is or isn't a word after that. At the bottom of every paper is a spot for them to make a few sentences with. There are several examples that are pre-made in this activity. And then when you get to the bottom, it allows you to, it has some blank ones where you can just kind of create your own. So you can add your own bases. If you want to do photosynthesis and you're a science teacher and they've had the exploration part of the unit already and you're diving into meanings and explaining, then you can create your own for the words that are in your units right here. Okay, so let's go back here. So next, that's the word matrices activity and how you do it. The next one that we're going to talk about, the next activity is called a spotlight activity. This is not something that you're making any additional resources or any different things for. The purpose is that students will better understand the curriculum or the content vocabulary that you're using already. So the task could be you select one or two complex or curriculum specific words from your lesson. So for instance, maybe I'm a social studies teacher, I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher, and I'm teaching about the antebellum period. Okay, so I can just look at my curriculum and say, okay, these are the two sources that we're learning about. Maybe one's a primary, one's a secondary source. When it comes up during my lesson the first time, I'm going to explicitly teach the affixes and the root to help students understand the meaning of that word. So I'm going to put antebellum up on the board. I'm going to talk about the fact that ante is the prefix and ante means before, happening before something. Then I'm going to talk about the fact that bellum means the war. So antebellum refers to before the war. And I'm going to tell them that they can apply, again, the prefix ante to any other words they see with ante at the beginning, because it will mean before something happened, and bellum again means war, and they can apply that to different words as well. Let the students know, like I said, that they transfer across all content areas and things that they're reading at home. Sometimes students get in the mind frame that this only applies to English class or this only applies to social studies class. And so we have to tell them explicitly that they can apply this to everything that they're reading or seeing when they see these different morphemes. Another example could be a math class and you're teaching shapes in your math class and you write the word triangle on the board. You explain the prefix means tri, which means 3, and the shape is called a triangle because it has 3 angles. Tri means 3. And again, they can relate this to other words that share that prefix, such as tricycle, triceratops, triplet. And there's a link at the bottom that goes into more detail on these different activities that we haven't discussed today. But those are 2 really popular and easy ones to use in secondary. So where does this fit into your instruction? It could be a pre-work activity. when you're introducing the unit or the chapter. Again, just be careful with science because you want them to have that exploration at the beginning. But once they start to explore and you start digging into the different sources in any of your content areas, you can definitely introduce morphemes and what the word parts mean and tell them again how it applies to different words. You can use it as a warm-up activity before a lesson. Some teachers call this bell work or bell ringer. You can use it as an early finisher. If you've already done direct and explicit instruction on how to do word matrices, you can give the students many matrices after that once they know how to assemble and make new meanings. And it can be an early finisher, it can be reinforcement. Just make sure that initial instruction happens so they can see how to do that. So just some final thoughts. Morphology instruction can be used to increase fluency, spelling, expand vocabulary, and reading comprehension. So there's just a lot of implications for morphology in secondary learning. Morphological awareness activities can be taught with very little prep time, which is a win in secondary land because we don't have a lot of prep time. But the impact can be huge because the knowledge can unlock meaning for students in that unit of study and beyond. So I want you to consider an upcoming unit of study. I want you to think about what morphemes need to be taught for the students to have a deeper understanding of this material. Maybe identify 3 to 5 different words that they need to understand and breaking the morphemes out of those. What activity will you choose to explicitly teach the morphemes? Will you choose to do a word matrix? Will you choose to do the spotlight activity? Do you want to look at the other activities that I just pointed out? And where will this fit into your lesson? Is it going to be a pre-activity? Is it going to be a bell ringer? Is it going to be part of the scope of the lesson that they're learning? If you have a 50 or 55-minute block, do you want to devote 5 minutes 3 times a week to these kinds of activities? So just start to think about where this fits within the scope of your lessons. And then I want you to watch and see the students' understanding and learning develop and their reading ability develop as they encounter these new words. So thank you so much for tuning into today's session. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can contact us at louisianaliteracy@la.gov, or you can contact me directly at natalie.kleber@la.gov. I am the middle school, high school literacy PD specialist on staff, and I am more than happy to schedule time with you if you need to go into either morphological awareness or whatever your literacy needs are for your school or your district. Thanks again.